Once upon a time, deep in the heart of a dense forest, on the edge of a small village, there stood a tiny cottage. In this modest home lived a poor woodcutter and his two children, Hansel and Gretel. The woodcutter had been raising his children alone, after his wife passed away, but as time went on, their situation grew increasingly dire. One day, the woodcutter remarried, bringing a stepmother into the children's lives. The stepmother was not fond of the children, and found it difficult to care for them in the midst of their poverty. Late one night, she discussed a grim plan with the woodcutter. "We cannot all survive on so little food. If we do not abandon the children in the forest, we will all starve." The woodcutter initially refused, but after much persuasion, he reluctantly agreed. That night, Hansel and Gretel overheard their parents' conversation. Hansel quietly slipped out of the house and collected white pebbles, which he put in his pocket. The next morning, the stepmother took the children deep into the forest. "Wait here while we cut wood. We'll come back to get you," she said, before disappearing with the woodcutter. Hansel had been dropping pebbles along the way, so when night fell, the children followed the trail of pebbles back home. The stepmother was furious when they returned. A few days later, she decided to take them even deeper into the forest. This time, Hansel wanted to gather pebbles again, but the stepmother locked them in their room. Instead, Hansel crumbled some bread and used the crumbs to mark the path. However, birds ate all the crumbs, and Hansel and Gretel became hopelessly lost. The siblings wandered through the forest for several days, hungry and cold. Eventually, they stumbled upon a small house made entirely of sweets. The walls were made of bread, the roof was chocolate, and the windows were sugar. Starving, the children began to eat the house. Suddenly, a creaky voice called out from inside, "Who is nibbling at my house?" Frightened, Hansel and Gretel answered, "We are hungry children. We're just eating a little bit." Then the door opened, and an old witch with red eyes and wrinkled skin emerged. She welcomed the children inside, promising them more food and a place to rest. "Come in, dear children. Eat your fill and rest. You can have more sweets." But the house was a trap. The witch planned to eat the children. She locked Hansel in a cage and made Gretel do housework. Hansel was given food every day to fatten him up, but Gretel was forced to go hungry to ensure her brother had enough to eat. The witch regularly checked if Hansel was gaining weight, but Hansel cleverly tricked her by offering a bone instead of his finger, making her believe he was still too thin. Weeks passed, and the witch grew impatient. "Today, I will eat your brother," she declared. She ordered Gretel to light the oven. However, clever Gretel asked the witch to check if the oven was hot enough. As the witch bent over to look inside, Gretel gave her a hard shove, sending her into the flames. The witch perished in the fire. Hansel and Gretel searched the witch's house and found a stash of precious jewels. They filled their pockets with treasure and set off to find their way home. After days of wandering, they finally stumbled upon their father's cottage. The woodcutter was overjoyed to see them return, and they learned that their stepmother had left for good. Hansel and Gretel lived happily ever after with their father, free from worry about hunger, thanks to the treasure they had found. And so, they all lived happily ever after,